protocols, what kind of topologies are used for communicating for communicating between various microcontrollers and various different systems inside a vehicle. Now, to understand the need of in-vehicle communication, if we consider like if we consider making separate circuit for each and every electrical appliances inside a vehicle. For example, let's say we have a separate circuit for side indicators, we have a separate circuit for just controlling the headlights and tail lights, we have separate switches for controlling the side view mirrors or rear view mirror, or and separate circuit for door windows. And if we if we go ahead and make such uh, individual electrical circuit for each and every electrical appliance in application in our vehicle, then there are going to be around 40 to 50 circuits inside the vehicle itself. And the amount of conductor, the wire, the copper wire that is going to be utilized in developing such individual circuits is going to be a lot more lot way too much. And the weight of that wiring harness is going to be nearly about 15 to 30 kilograms. Now, if we if we are thinking of having efficient like fuel efficient vehicles, or let's say few electrically efficient vehicles, then having 15 to 30 kilograms of just copper wire running from front to the rear end of the vehicle is not good. And as we need to reduce the weight of this, so as we reduce the weight, the entire weight, it is going to affect the entire weight of the vehicle, and so is the efficiency of the vehicle is going to improve. So that's why we need certain in-vehicle communication protocols, and they make the wiring harness less bulky, they make it less complex, they make it easy to install in the vehicles if any repairs are needed or if any replacement is needed. So these kind of communication protocols are a type of discipline. Like let's go ahead and see what kind of topologies are firstly implemented in our vehicle. So first we have the star topology. Now in star topology, let's understand this topology with this image. These circles denote each and every microcontroller. Let me just grab my pen. So these circles denote microcontroller, each microcontroller. And or we can also say they are various sensors which are mounted across our vehicle, and this middle circle is actually a microcontroller, the central brain, or it is the main microcontroller. So all microcontrollers or all sensors communicate with the one central microcontroller, and this microcontroller makes the decision for each and every other controllers which are connected with it. So this is a type of this is star topology type network. It is also known as star network. The only reason this is known as star is because it looks like a star if we draw it in like the way we are taught how star looks like. The next topology is bus topology. Now, bus is not like the bus like we have in our transportation. No, it is not like that. But in bus topology, each and every microcontroller is connected with a single or two or a pair of wire which is shared between each and every microcontroller. So if there is any data transmission, or if there is any message transmission being done, it is going to be shared over a single line or a pair of wires, which is going to be read by each and every microcontroller which is connected in that particular bus. So this the bus topology is widely used in our vehicles, but the actual topology which is highly used is the combination of both the star and bus topology. So here we can see we have star topology at the end, and they all of the star topology microcontrollers are connected with each other via bus topology, bus network. So this is a sort of topology which is implemented in our vehicles, in current vehicles, and we are going to see it in our future vehicles. This network has been has been in our cars for last 10 years now. I might be wrong. It might be used more than that. So this is because it helps the microcontroller to communicate with each another in star topology, as well as they share the data over the bus, so that they can communicate with other star topological star networks via the bus. So Moving ahead, now we are going to talk about what are the communication protocols which are used in our vehicle. So firstly, what is a communication protocol? Now, a communication protocol, to understand or to define, I would say, how do we communicate? We as humans, we communicate via languages. We have English, Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, and we have local languages with the help of which we communicate with each other. So our brains are our microcontrollers, and our microcontrollers communicate via languages, right? We say hello, hi, good morning, and that's how we start a conversation. And then if we are working in teams, so we are sharing data over various brains, right? We are sharing data with our colleagues. So those are they are typically various microcontrollers sharing data with each other, because they are trying to build something when we are working as a team. So we communicate, we share data, and we give the data in a proper format. There is a we prepare reports and compile all the information we have in that particular report, and we share it with our colleagues, which understand it, and they work according to that, right? So microcontrollers in electronics, they cannot pursue data in English, Marathi, or Hindi, or such languages. They understand the data in bits, zeros and ones, true or false. That's the only thing how microcontrollers communicate with them. So there has to be a protocol, there has to be a discipline while transferring data or while communicating between each and every microcontroller. So these are the communication protocols which are used in our vehicles. Firstly is the LIN. This is a short form for local interconnect network. Then we have CAN, we have FlexRay, and MOST. So LIN is used for headlamps, the lights, the auxiliary lights, the side lights, the brake lights, the power windows, door locks, power seat. Also, if we have heated seats, then it will be used. It will be using LIN protocol for communication. And the speed for like the data transfer speed in LIN is between 10 kbps to 125 kbps. Then we have the CAN bus protocol. Uh, this controller area network, which is why it is an advanced network over LIN bus. So it is used in electronic indicators. If the side indicators are electronically controlled, then the driver's information is shared over CAN bus. The HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system uses CAN bus. Then the failure diagnostics, which we conduct, which the service centers conduct, where they connect the SDT, the system diagnostic tools, with the connect a laptop with the car, and they check for each and every sensor are functioning properly or not. That has been done over CAN bus. So the data transfer rate in CAN bus is 125 kbps to 1 mbps. Then we have FlexRay. Now FlexRay is widely used in luxurious cars because of its functionality and its cost. But at times the functions which in the application in which FlexRay are used is been taken over by CAN bus in our current vehicles, which are inexpensive and which are commuter friendly. So in high-end vehicles, FlexRay is used in engine control, ABS, transmission control, brake control, suspension control, or ESC, EBD, and all of these systems are using FlexRay communication protocols in high-end vehicles. And the reason because of using FlexRay in high-end in such applications is that they need to react quickly, because these are some safety features like brake controls and ABS and ESC, EBD are actually emergency systems of our vehicle. They are the safety system of our vehicle, and if they are not they do not function properly, then it can be dangerous for the passengers sitting inside the vehicle and the driver himself or herself. And the data transfer rate in FlexRay is 1 mbps to 10 mbps. Now lastly, we have the MOST feature, MOST communication protocol. This is basically media oriented system transfer. So all the media oriented applications like infotainment system, navigation system, your music system, the Bluetooth, or how we can, like, we play music inside in our vehicles, is actually they are communicating the data over MOST bus. The reason for this is because it has high data transfer rate, and it uses the optic fiber wires for transferring the data. And because of this, their data transfer rate is 10 mbps and higher. Now the reason why we don't use MOST in in place of FlexRay is because MOST is mostly used for media transfer. Like if you are, for example, if you want to listen to music, we don't want like the data of music is the bit rate of music is less. Like size of that music is less, but the transfer speed has to be fast because we want the music to play instantaneously, right? But this MOST feature is not robust or highly, what we can say, reliable when it comes to using it for ABS or any other safety system. We will go deep into this further ahead. So firstly, we have the LIN bus protocol, local interconnect network. So LIN bus protocol uses only a single wire. This is the single wire which has other microcontrollers connected over it. So it now back we saw that LIN bus protocol has a data transfer rate of 10 kbps to 125 kbps, but there are some drawbacks to this. Like it can transfer 125 kbps data over a particular length of the bus. So if the length of the bus is 40 meters, it will the highest bit rate it can transfer is 19.2 kbps. So if we want to transfer data at 125 kbps, the bus length has to be reduced. Now, the reason why I said 40 meters here is because our conventional vehicles, the wiring harness of our conventional vehicles is about 40-meter of 40-meter distance in length. If we are measuring it from each and every node, so every microcontroller is called node over here. So we can have one master controller and up to 16 slave nodes in the in LIN communication protocol. Now this LIN communication protocol is widely used for our like this electrical appliances like the lighting system, in the in vehicle the in compartment lighting system and the outside lighting system, which is headlight, tail light, side indicators. And we can this LIN protocol is also used in electronic mirrors and controlling the windows opening and closing. It is also used in locking and unlocking the doors. And these kind of application don't require much data rate, and they are not as they are not as important in certain cases. They are not as important as safety features. That's why this protocol is the communication bit rate in this protocol is not as high as other protocols. Moving ahead, we have controller area network, which is CAN bus protocol. Now, I will go deep into this because LIN bus and CAN bus are widely used in our current vehicles. You name the vehicle and they have LIN bus and CAN bus operating in them. These two buses have been are in application in our vehicles for more than 10 years now. And both of this bus net, both of these topologies, or both of these protocols, LIN bus and CAN bus, are message based protocols. They transfer messages over the bus. They have those messages have a particular identity number. Just like us humans, just like us students, we have a particular enrollment number. Every messages in which are being transferred in the bus have that particular identifying number. Now, in LIN bus, we had a single wire working as a bus which connected each and every microcontroller to communicate with each other. In CAN bus, we have two such wires, the CAN high wire and the CAN low wire. Now, the reason for implementing two such wires is because if one wire fails, the other wire will still transfer the data. So in case of LIN bus, if the wire fails, if there is any cut down, or if the wire breaks down some in between because of external issues, the communication between microcontrollers will stop. It will end, and that is not desirable in any way. So that's why CAN bus has two wires, the CAN high wire and the CAN low wire, which both simultaneously transfer the data over microcontrollers. So even the microcontrollers here are called the nodes. They use proper CAN transceivers. Transceiver, the meaning of transceiver here is transmitting and receiving. So a single CAN transceiver can transmit the message and can also receive the message over the CAN bus. Now the bit rate, the data transfer rate in this one is more than 120. It goes from 125 kbps to 1 mbps. 1 mbps is the highest bit rate for maximum length of 40 meters. Now, what kind of message a CAN bus protocol has is like it has around almost 7 to 8 parts in a particular message of CAN bus. So it starts with a standard starter frame, which is a dominant 0. So if we the next slide will have what an actual CAN message looks like. So this is just a idea of what parts the CAN frame is divided into. The first is a starter frame, which is just a dominant 0. It is just a simply voltage high in the bus. Then we have the identifier, the ID, which can be of 11 bits, or if the frame is extended, then it can be of 29 bits. So 11 bits frame, the identifier number actually makes it prioritizes the message. So if the number is low, if the identifier number falls, for example, if the identifier number is 0, then the priority is the highest for that message. If this number keeps on increasing, if the identifier number is say 122, then its priority will be less than 121. So the reason for having such identifier number is to set the priority, which message should be sent firstly, which message should be given high priority for data transmission or data receiving over the bus, because there cannot be more than, like, we have to avoid more number of messages being transmitted over the bus. So that's why we need to have priority set to each and every messages which are being transmitted in the bus. Next thing we have is the remote transmission request, which is RTR, which is this one. It is a 6-bit 6 bits in the message frame. So this remote transmission request indicates whether the node or the microcontroller is asking for data or it is sending the data. So this denotes that. Then we have the control. The control contains the identifier extension bit. So if the message identifying number is more than 11 bits, which comes between 11 to 29 bits, then we have to make it aware that this is an extended frame, and this is done with the control part of the message frame. Then after control we have the data part. This data is comprised of about 64 bits, and it contains the actual data or the sensor data or the message or the action which needs to be performed by the other microcontroller. It is contained in this part of the CAN message frame. Then we have the cyclic redundancy check, which keeps an eye if the data is not being hampered or not by other microcontrollers. So there are multiple microcontrollers simultaneously sending data, trying to send the data, but the highest priority message will get the advantage over other messages, and that message will be transmitted. So so that particular message is not being hampered by any other microcontroller, we need to have cyclic redundancy check at the end of the data. Lastly, we have the acknowledgement. Now, acknowledgement is done by the receiving end. So one microcontroller sends the data, other microcontroller receives the data. So we as a human, when we share any email or share any message, we expect a reply from them that yes, I have received the email. I have going through your data and so and so. So that's the same thing over here. This acknowledgement bit actually is shared by the receiving end. It shares the message back and it says, yes, thank you for sending me the data. I have received it. It was in proper condition. It wasn't hampered. This is that portion of the message frame. And lastly, we have the end of frame, which is just a 1. So in usual cases, in usual electronics, we consider, let me just draw the signals over here. In usual electronics, we consider this as 1 bit and this as 0 bit. But in case of a CAN bus protocol, we consider this as 0 bit and this as 1 bit. The lower portion is 1 and the higher portion is 0. Why? This is how an actual CAN message frame looks like. This will make you understand why 0 is a higher bit and 1 is a lower bit. Now, both CAN high wire and CAN low wires have 2 volts running within them. 2 volts electricity running within them. So that 2 volts is taken as is considered as 1 bit in CAN message frame, not in general electronics. CAN message frame works inversely than general electronics. So here, this particular end of the frame is of 2 volts. It has 2 volts electricity running over there. Now, whenever a data is being transferred, the microcontroller who is sending the data, it will bump the voltage level of high and reduce the voltage level of the low wire. So the high wire will bump to 3.5 volts, while the low wire will reduce its voltage to 1.5 volts. While simultaneously, if we calculate the difference between these two wires, the high and the low wire, when the data is started to be transferring, which is the 0 bit, then which is 3.5 minus 1.5, we still get the difference of 2 volts. So this is the main consideration over here. CAN bus always tries to maintain the potential difference of 2 volts between the CAN high wire and the CAN low wire. And this bump makes makes each and every microcontroller realize that there is a message frame being transferred. So this is what a start of the frame looks like. It is just a dominant 0, which is bump and the drop in the CAN high and the CAN low wire. Then it transmits the data or the identification number, the 11-bit identification number. So in here, the identity number was 000000100100. So this is the 11-bit number. Now, usually, when we decide the identification number, we use hex code, hex decimals. So hex decimals are 0, X, AA, or AB, or AD, or AC. So this particular hexadecimals have their particular proper integer numbers, which are understood by microcontrollers. I don't remember the actual formula to how to calculate the particular decimal numbers for any hexadecimal, but there are converters available on internet. You can just Google convert hexadecimal to your integer numbers, and you can see if you put 0xAA, then it has a particular integer number assigned to it. So based on that, it is divided into this particular bits, and then we have this is the cyclic this request, remote transmission request. Then we have the control frame, then we have the 8 bits of data frame, then the cyclic redundancy check field, and lastly we have the acknowledgement and the end of the frame. End of the frame is just mere 1, which is just 2 volts current running over the bus. So if you ever connect a scope, not a multimeter but an electrical scope, with your CAN bus of the vehicle, which is a DB9 connector, which is located below the steering wheel inside your dashboard. If you connect the scope with it, and the connection of the high wire with the positive terminal of the scope and the negative with the ground, you will get to see the top portion of this frame, this top portion. And if you connect the low wires, the positive terminal with the low wire and the negative terminal of the scope with ground, you will get to see the bottom portion of the CAN message frame. So this is what a message frame looks like. This bottom image over here shows the extended frame. When the identity number is more than 11 bits, then it has an extension bit. So in the control field itself, after the remote transmission request. Now the CAN bus.
Yeah. And also, I would like to mention that in nowadays, you find the electric vehicles, the CAN bus plays a very important role when the battery BMS is connected to the battery pack. So that BMS is connected to the CAN bus adapter, and that CAN bus adapter responds to the microcontroller processor. So when we use the application or the cloud platform, that data of the battery, SOC or current, temperature and voltage and temperature on all. So that all data is stored into the database and cloud platform, as well as your application using the unique identifier of that BMS. And during the running condition of the vehicle, if you find any kind of failure, so at that time you can check the failure of the failure of the battery pack itself. So this is the beauty of the CAN bus, and also it reduces the wire hardness with the use of just 2 wires, that is the CAN high and CAN low.
Yeah, exactly. Because the reason for using other reason for using CAN bus protocol in just controlling the BMS is that if you look at the battery pack of an electric vehicle, let's assume Teslas, then there are almost more than 10,000 cells, right, Harshal?
Right, yeah.
So monitoring each and every cell can be difficult if we have separate circuit for each and every cell. So each cell has a temperature sensor, a current sensor, and a voltage sensor. So 3 sensors multiplied by 10,000, that means 30,000 sensors over just a battery pack. And transmitting the data of 30,000 sensors to 1 or 2 BMS can be difficult. So that's why they use CAN bus protocol. So they transmit the data of those sensors in the CAN message frame, which I showcased over here, and that data is being taken by the BMS, battery management system, and based on that, it keeps monitoring each and every cell inside the battery pack. So yeah, this CAN bus has a greater importance. Secondly, in our current vehicles, we have the integration of CAN bus and LIN bus. So the CAN bus is the backbone of our vehicle, and LIN bus is the other arms and legs of our vehicle. So CAN bus communicates with each and every microcontroller which is connected with a LIN bus. So let's say for example, a driver is sitting over here and he wants to control the mirror of the passenger side. So he gives the input on his door switch where the joystick is provided for for adjusting the mirror. So that data of that door switch is going to be transmitted to a LIN bus microcontroller, which is taking the data of that joystick. That data, it will transfer it on a LIN bus, which will go on a microcontroller which is connected with the CAN bus. So this microcontroller will take that data, it will convert it into CAN message frame. That message frame will run over the CAN bus, and the other microcontroller which has to receive that data, it will receive it, it will communicate it on the LIN bus, and that way the other microcontroller which is controlling the access of the mirror will take that data, and accordingly it will readjust the mirror which is desired by the driver. Similarly, each and every windows can be controlled by the driver over LIN bus and CAN bus. So CAN bus communicates with LIN bus, and that's how driver controls each and every segment around the vehicle. Now, next we have is a better version of CAN bus, which is known as FlexRay. Now, FlexRay has 4 wires running over it. So just like CAN bus has 2 wires, the CAN high and CAN low wire, similarly, FlexRay has two pairs of wires. So this is the FlexRay channel 1 and this is the channel 2. The reason for, and the data transmission over this is almost similar to CAN bus, but the data in both channels are divided over like it is separated by time milliseconds. Now, if the channel A starts to, like, usually the channel A will start sending the data first, and from behind it, the channel B will start sending the data. The reason for this is if there is any issue with the data transmission, like if any other microcontroller starts sending the data when one microcontroller is sending the data, then the actual message frame will be hampered. So that should not happen. So to keep the safety of the system and make it more reliable, they implemented another same channel which sends the same data but with a delay in time. So because of this, the error, if there is any error in any message, then it can be detected, which makes it more robust and more reliable and faster than CAN bus. And these kind of the FlexRays are currently being used in BMWs, Audis, Volvo, Mercedes, and all the high-end vehicles which are running on our roads are budget-friendly vehicles like Maruti, Tata, Mahindra, and even Volkswagen. The high-end models of Volkswagen uses FlexRay. The low-end models of Volkswagen uses LIN bus and CAN bus for message transmission between the microcontrollers inside the vehicle. Now, lastly, we have the media-oriented system transport, which is MOST. Now, this is only for transmitting small packets of data, small size of data of audio, video, or any controlling system. So, if you when a driver is touching the touch screen which is provided in current vehicles for our media system for navigation or for audio for any music system, then that particular data is transmitted over a MOST bus, which is communicating with other speakers and other amplifiers which are inside the vehicle. So the reason for this is they need high beat rate. If you are gamers, you need high FPS, right? But if you are into CAD modeling and using engineering tools like ANSYS or Altair, you need heavy machine. processor to do heavy lifting. In that case, you don't need faster screen processing, right? Similarly, here CAN bus, FlexRay, and LIN bus do the heavy lifting of the data, while MOST bus does the FPS work, the high frames per second work. It transmits the data in high speed so that there is no delay in the audio signals or the video signals, which is entertaining the passengers sitting inside the vehicle. So that's why this data transfer is done by fiber optic cables, which, if you are aware, then Jio Fiber and Airtel Fiber have now been introduced in India, and those are the fast internet services which are done by fiber optic cables. Fiber optic cables actually transmit light as data. So this is I'm drawing the cross section of the cable. So it has multiple lights being transferred inside the cable, and based on those light signals, like there are the light signals are in particular orientation, and based on that, the receiver actually understands what the data is being transferring, and that's how the microcontrollers communicate with each other via transferring the light signals inside these fiber optic cables. So this is how MOST, like the media oriented system transport, works. Now we will this brings us to the end of all the communication protocol which are being currently utilized in our vehicles. And now we will move to advanced technologies which are being used in our current IC engine vehicles, and which we are going to see in electric vehicles too. Now, some of those technologies which are mentioned here are common technologies which are standard, which are used as standard in various vehicles now because of the safety requirements. While there are certain technologies which we are going to see in future, and there are certain technologies which are being used by luxury vehicles and high-end vehicles for their safety requirements. So firstly, we have the anti-lock braking system. Now this is a simple image for understanding anti-lock braking system. Now when we, like yesterday when we talked about any control system, we learned that any control system has three parts: a sensor, a microcontroller, and a actuator. So even in this, we have three parts: sensors, microcontrollers, and actuators. So we have speed sensors, wheel speed sensor, which record the speed of each wheel of the vehicle. So it will send the data of the speed data of each wheel to a particular microcontroller, which is over here. We call it ECU or ECM, electronic control unit or electronic control module. Now ECU will sense this data, and based on that, it will compare the wheel speed or the slippage of each and every wheel. So the purpose of anti-lock braking system is to prevent the wheels from locking up. So when any wheel of the vehicle locks up, it tends to, if the wheel, like let's say you're using your vehicle on a highway, and your vehicle is running at 80 kmph or 100 kmph speed. Now there is a condition when you need to apply brake suddenly. At that point, there are going to be chances when the wheel is going to be locked up, and when the wheel gets locked, the inertia is being changed, and it suddenly becomes stationary from a rotating condition. Because of this, it can lose its control, and it will lose the adhesion with the road, and it will slip and skid over the road, which will directly affect the stability of the vehicle. This is not desired when sudden braking is applied. So that's why we try and prevent this locking of wheels. And for this, we have anti-lock braking system. So it senses the wheel speed, and it senses if the wheel is spinning, then there is going to be data transmitted instantaneously. And if the wheel gets stopped, if the wheel is locked, it will become stationary, it will stop rotating, and that's when the data which will be transmitted for that wheel will be zero, that the speed is being recorded as zero, while other wheels are spinning. So microcontroller will understand that if 3 or 2 wheels are spinning at a particular speed, but the other 2 wheels are just stationary, that means those particular wheels are getting locked, and it will sense this, it will understand this, and it will allow the brakes to be disengaged on the locked wheels, so that once the brakes have been disengaged, it will allow the wheels to rotate again. And that's, in this way, anti-lock braking system, it just locks and unlocks the wheels, and that's how it controls the wheel speed and prevents the wheels from getting locked. Now to see, like, now to understand how they how the anti-lock braking system controls the brake system from engaging and disengaging, we have this particular image. Now below here we have brake disc for like disc brakes for each wheel. FL means front left, rear right, rear left, and front right. Now our usual braking system, the brake like the brake distribution system, brake circuit in our vehicle is in X form. So this is a tandem master cylinder. So there are two outlets in this master cylinder. One outlet controls the front left and rear right. The other outlet will control the front right and the rear left. The reason for using such kind of circuit is because if even one circuit fails, if there is if the it starts leaking brake fluid, then other circuit will still remain working, and it will still keep the vehicle in control for emergency cases, so that you can just get back to your service station and get this fixed. So in this case, when the brake pedal is applied, there are valves provided with each and every wheel. So there is a sensor on each wheel which sends the data to the microcontroller, and microcontroller has the hands over these hydraulic valves: C1, D1, C2, D2, C3, D3, and C3, C4, D4. So these valves are actually controlled by the microcontroller. So if any wheel stops rotating or it's getting locked, it will sense, the microcontroller will sense, and it will allow the valves to release the brake pressure from the lines of that particular wheel, and it will let that brake fluid to flow back to the reservoir. That's how anti-lock braking system works. Similarly, we have electronic brake distribution, brake force distribution, which is the same system controlled over ABS. So ABS, EBD, and ESC all function over the same circuit, all function over the same sensor, the same microcontroller, but the rules are different. So the electronic brake force distribution system works for distributing the brake force on other wheels. Like there are conditions when your vehicle will oversteer or understeer, and or let's say there will be conditions when your vehicle dives or pitch. So in those conditions, we need to control the brake force on the front wheels or the rear wheels or on one particular wheel. So that can be done by sensing the data from accelerometer, which is provided inside the vehicle, which senses the data of pitching, yawing, and rolling motion of the vehicle, and based on that data, the microcontroller senses it, and it controls the brake force distribution over the wheels. So it does. So if, let's say, if a brake force on the front wheel is required, like it is required more compared to the rear wheels, what it will do is it will the microcontroller will control these valves to uh, uh, close the lines for the rear wheels, and allow the fluid to flow in the front wheels only. So that in that way, the brake force will be applied more on the front wheels compared to the rear wheels. Now there is another system working over this ABS and EBD, which is ESC. The full form of ESC is Electronic Stability Control. In some vehicles, we also call it ESP. So the function of ESC and ESP is same. What it does is it controls the stability of the vehicle, which it controls the oversteer on the understeer of the vehicle. Now I hope I don't know if you are aware about oversteering condition and understeering condition, but I'll define those conditions in a simple fashion. So let's say you are on highway again. You are driving your vehicle at 80 kmph. There is a turn in the highway, slight curve in the highway, and you give the input, and somehow the steering input, and somehow your steering input is more than the required input, and in that case what happens is you dive more into the corner, which is not desirable, and the rear will start to lose traction, and the rear end of the vehicle will fish out of the actual track. The simple way of saying this is drifting your car. So drifting is actually a simple example of oversteering. That is, drifting is performed intentionally, but oversteer is unintentional, and it happens because of less traction on rear wheels. So this hinders the stability of the vehicle. So to prevent the oversteer condition, what happens, it like this the red line shows the path of the vehicle which is being oversteered. But to control this oversteer, the wheel sensors and the accelerometer sensors actually senses the data of the motion of the vehicle and the speed of the wheels. And based on the data, the microcontroller understands that vehicle is getting oversteered, because let's say if the rear wheels are losing traction, that means there is less friction on rear wheels and more friction on front wheels, which means the rear wheels will rotate faster compared to the front wheels. I hope you are understanding this. So microcontroller will understand this difference in speed of front and rear wheels, and it will make assumption that the vehicle is getting oversteered. So what it will do, it will control the valves of that particular wheel. Let's say in case of oversteer, it will break the outer wheel of the vehicle, outermost wheel of the vehicle, so that it makes the corrects the path of the vehicle, and it will go in the desired direction. This might be a little confusing to understand, but when you actually imagine it, it will become easier for you to understand. Next we have the same ESC control, but for understeer condition. Now understeer is opposite of oversteer. So same example, you are driving your vehicle on highway at 80 kmph. There is a curve and you are turning the steering input, like giving the input to the steering, but the curve is so sharp that your vehicle is not turning in that particular direction. You need to apply more input on the steering wheel. But certainly you are at the end of your steering wheel, and there is no further way to give more input to the steering. So in this condition, the front wheels will rotate more and rear wheels will rotate less, because the traction on rear wheels is more compared to the front wheels, and this difference in speed will be noted by the microcontroller, and it will apply the brake on the inner side of the vehicle, the inner wheel of the vehicle. So if the inner wheel is rotating less, it will provide a pivot point for the vehicle. So it will pivot at this particular wheel and allow the other wheels to rotate fast and correcting the path of the vehicle. And that's how understeer condition can be corrected and the vehicle can move on its corrected path. I hope you are understanding the electronic stability control, because this can be a little confusing, but once you imagine it, if you get into vehicle dynamics more deeper, it will be easier for you to understand. Now, this regenerative braking system is an advanced technology, or let's say on new technology which we are going to see in our electric vehicles. Technically, it is not new. It has been in use for quite some time now. But why we call it new is because people like the owners don't are not aware about this system. Now, each and everyone rides a bike or drives a car, and we know that engines have three different powers: brake power, the IHP, the indicated power, the brake power, and friction power. So usually when we are riding a bike, we tend to decelerate the throttle slowly, so that the speed of the bike is gradually decreased. So in this condition, this phenomena is known as engine braking. So in engine braking, we use the friction power of the engine and the other mechanical parts to slow down the bike, right? So in similar fashion, this regenerative braking uses the braking system, like it uses the energy, the momentum of the vehicle to recover the energy which is being wasted while moving the vehicle. So for example, you are driving your electric vehicle, and somehow, like you are on a bridge, and you are at the topmost portion of the bridge, and now the bridge is going to come downwards, the slope is downwards, so you don't need to put any throttle input for increasing the speed, right? So in this case, what will happen, the electric motor will act as a generator, and while as the vehicle moves down, it will, with that momentum of the vehicle, it will regenerate the energy, and it will recharge the battery up till some extent. So the efficiency of regenerative braking system in our current electric vehicle is not high. It is hardly 50%. So at least it will it will recover the 50% of wasted energy into and convert it into recharging a battery. So this is how regenerative braking system works. But you cannot change the intensity of regenerative braking. So like in brakes, in our current brakes, we vary with the input on the brake pedal or the brake lever in our bikes or cars, and based on that input, the brake force has been varied. So if you press the brake pedal way too harshly, the vehicle will react quickly and stop quickly. But if you just slightly press the brake pedal, just feather touch it, then it's going to slow down gradually. Similarly, in similar fashion, regenerative braking does not work. It doesn't have such sort of intensity for controlling the power of regeneration. So to prevent this, we have to implement our regular brake system with in our electric vehicle, so that it doesn't have to 100% rely on regenerative braking, because regenerative braking is not efficient and it cannot stop the vehicle uh, quickly. And that's why we have regular hydraulic braking system also with our electric vehicles, within our electric vehicles. Now next we have the adaptive cruise control. Now you guys would be aware about the auto braking system which was introduced by Volvo, which I mentioned yesterday. Now that thing was Volvo was a proprietary company to use auto braking system or auto brake assist in their vehicles. So that was a safety feature in Volvo cars which tried to brake by itself if there was any situation of collision, and if the driver was not paying any attention, which in the obstructions front of the vehicle. So it will say the vehicle will sense those objects in front of it, which can be a car, which can be a pedestrian, and if the driver does not react to those obstructions, the vehicle will press the it will press the brakes by itself, and it will get the car to a standstill, or it will slow down the speed of the vehicle. In similar fashion, adaptive cruise control also works. So cruise control is a system which locks the speed locks the speed of the vehicle at a required speed. So again, the example of highway. Now you don't want your like in vehicles without cruise control, we have our right foot on accelerator pedal, and we try and manage to keep the vehicle on a particular speed, 80 kmph or 100 kmph, whatever speed we desire. And because of this, at some point our right ankle starts aching, it starts paining, and it starts paining so bad that you can't hold it for a long duration. So for to prevent this, to allow the driver to stretch his leg while doing long tours, cruise control was introduced. And cruise control is a system which locks the speed of the vehicle, which is set by the driver. So let's say you want the vehicle to run at 80 kmph, you turn on the cruise controller at 80 kmph, and it will hold the speed of the vehicle at 80 kmph. Even if the driver lifts his right foot off the accelerator pedal, the speed of the vehicle will remain maintained and controlled at 80 kmph. But the issue with that was, you the if another car comes in front of it, the cruise control will not stop. It will keep the speed of the vehicle at 80 kmph, and so the driver needs to press the brake pedal and reduce the speed. As soon as the driver presses the brake pedal, the cruise control will turn off, and that's how the control of the speed will be given back to the driver. This is the usual case of cruise control, normal cruise control. In adaptive cruise control, it has the ultrasonic sensors, the wave propagation sensors around the vehicle, and it keeps tracking the speed of each and every car around it. So if the front car is slowing down, if like in case when adaptive cruise control is turned on, it's just like cruise control, it will be it will be locked at one particular speed. But if the front car is slowing down, the our car, the ego car, will sense it. It will sense the reduction in speed of the the leading vehicle which is in front of us, and based on that reduction in distance, it will press the brake pedals and it will reduce the speed of the vehicle, which is to an desired speed. And that's how it will prevent any collision from happening. But once this lead car, the car which is ahead of us, it changes the lane or it speeds up, so based on that, our car, which is the ego car, will gain back its speed which was been set by the driver, and it will come back to its speed of 80 kmph which was set by the driver. So that's how adaptive cruise control works. In similar fashion, like autopilot or autonomous vehicles have adaptive cruise control, and it is like the advanced feature of adaptive cruise control is autopilot of Tesla. We will be looking into it in further slides in autopilot. So next we have the heel ascent and heel descent. So we have this issue whenever we are climbing any bridge, and if there is a traffic congestion on the bridge, then we have to hold the brake pedal, or we have to pull the handbrake lever, so that the brakes have been actuated and we don't have to press the brake, keep the brake pedal pressed. So in similar fashion, instead of that hand lever, heel ascent and heel descent control actually uh, helps the driver, assists the driver whenever the vehicle is either climbing any bridge or climbing any hill, or moving in the downward direction from a hill or a bridge. So this is implemented in low speed conditions. Now the the advanced version of heel ascent and heel descent is heel stop control. Now heel stop control is like when there is any traffic congestion, or you have to press the brake pedal on a upward hill or a downward hill, then in that particular condition, the microcontroller will sense the angle of the vehicle, the angle in which the vehicle is standing, and it will sense the wheel speed, which are zero, which denotes the stationary condition of the vehicle, and it will sense that, the microcontroller will sense that, and it will keep the brake pressure applied on all wheels, so that driver can lift his foot off the brake pedal, and the brakes will still be engaged. This recently this was implemented in our one of the sports bike, which is famously known as Suzuki Hayabusa. The third generation Suzuki Hayabusa has hill ascent and hill descent control and hill stopping control too. So with the new generation Hayabusa, this was a remarkable technology implemented with it, because I would say it is the first bike which has hill ascent and hill descent control. And after Hayabusa, various other super bikes now have started using the same sort of technology with their motorcycles too. Now, next we have the semi-active suspension system. Now, understanding semi-active or active suspension system, we will have to understand the damping coefficient of our current suspension systems. So, our current suspension system, you guys would be aware about dashport and springs in your subject of dynamics of machines, I suppose. And in that, there is a particular stiffness of spring, and there is a damping coefficient of that dashport, the vibration damper. Vibration damper is nothing but shock absorber in vehicles. So shock absorber has a particular vibration damping coefficient which controls the vibrations of the spring. Spring absorbs the energy and releases it, but spring has the tendency of keeping vibrating, keep the vibrations going on because of its nature. Now, this is not desirable, because if only the spring is provided with the suspension system, then it will vibrate, and if it goes over a bump or a pothole, and because of that, it will store the energy, and it will keep on releasing and storing the energy instantaneously, and it will keep the wheels vibrating, which will in turn be discomforting for our passengers. So to prevent that, we have to also provide shock absorbers, which dampens the frequency of the wheel, and it gradually brings it to a zero condition, or the desired condition, the standstill condition. I know mechanical guys are more aware about the vibration system of any system. Automobile engineers are not fond of it much, but to control the damping coefficient, like if the damping coefficient of shock absorber is constant in our usual scenarios, so is the spring rate, which is spring stiffness. But when it is desirable, so not every suspension of vehicle can be either stiff or soft. We have to have one common ground for our road vehicles. So if you are designing any race car, you need to have stiffer suspension, so that it handles well in during high speed cornering. But if you're designing any road vehicle, you need to have softer suspension, because you don't want stiffer suspension in that case, because stiff suspension will allow each and every road vibration or to be transmitted into the chassis and indirectly to the passengers. This is not desirable. That's why we have softer suspension on our current vehicles, but stiffer suspension in race cars. So if there are certain race cars which are also used as road vehicles by people. So in certain conditions, it becomes kind of hefty to drive a stiff car on road. So for such conditions, the semi-active suspension system was developed, which controls the damping coefficient of the shock absorber. So if you are aware about the construction of any shock absorber, It is simply a piston cylinder assembly, and there is shock absorber, the fluid inside it, which is nothing but shock absorber oil, damping oil, surrounded, which is filled inside the cylinder. So, and there are small orifices provided in the piston, which controls the flow of oil around it. So when the suspension or the when the shock absorber is being contracted, which means the piston will move down, what will it do? The oil below the piston will move upwards through these orifices, and it will like resist the speed of the piston moving downwards, and that's how it dampens the spring rate or dampens the vibration of any wheel. And simultaneously, if the wheels is going downwards, or it is expanding the suspension system, what in that case the piston will move up, and all the oil which is located above the piston will flow down through those orifices, and with this flow it will control the it will dampen the force of or the vibration which is being which is being provided, or which is being generated by the wheel. So these orifices play an important role in controlling the damping coefficient. So by controlling the diameter of these orifices, the damping coefficient of the shock absorber can be controlled. So if in downward stroke you want softer suspension, damping coefficient, you increase the diameter of the orifice. But in upward stroke, you want it to be stiff. You want the upward stroke to have slow speed. You contract the diameter of the orifice and make it small compared to other orifices. And in because of the small diameter of orifice, it will take much time for the fluid to flow upwards, and thus it will make the shock absorber stiff. So these controlling the diameter of orifice can be done mechanically and electrically in both ways. So if you are aware about the current Apache RTR 200 4V, it has adjustable front shock absorbers. So if they in adjustable shock absorbers, they have screws on top of the shock absorbers which you rotate and change the stiffness of the shock absorber. By rotating those screws, indirectly you are controlling the diameter of the orifice on the piston, and in that way you can control the compression and the rebound damping coefficient of the shock absorber. But let's say here in the same adjustable shock absorber, instead of doing that controlling manually with a screwdriver and your hand, you attach a servo motor on top of it, and that servo motor controls it twists the screw on the top of the shock absorber, and thus it controls the diameter of the orifices in the piston. And in that fashion, a semi-active suspension system works. The microcontroller takes data from vehicle speed, steering control, anti-squat, anti-dive, and other sensors, and based on that data, it makes assumption to make the suspension system soft or stiff, and based on that, it makes the actuators, which is servo motors, and it turns the screw, or it controls the diameter of the orifices inside the piston, and thus it controls the damping coefficient. So this is an example of semi-active suspension system. But in active suspension system, if you take off the semi out of the name, in active suspension system, the entire assembly of spring and dampers is deleted, and it is replaced by pneumatic springs. Pneumatic springs is nothing but rubber boots or rubber balloons, I would say, which are filled with sorry for my drawing. The pneumatic springs are made of rubber boots or rubber balloons which are filled with compressed air. So these compressed air, air is incompressible air is compressible in nature, but by controlling the pressure of the air, you can control the this damping coefficient of those pneumatic springs. So these shock absorbers are replaced by pneumatic springs, and in active suspension system, the pressure of the air inside these pneumatic springs is controlled, and based on that, the damping coefficient and the spring rate of the suspension system is varied. Now, active suspension system are been used in Audi A8L and BMW 7 Series cars. Also, Mercedes' S-Class Maybach also has active suspension system. And similarly, all the high-end vehicles, all the luxurious vehicles and expensive vehicles have active suspension implemented in them. If you are looking for semi-active suspension system, then our motorcycles like Ducati Panigale V4, the newer Yamaha R1M, also newer third generation Hayabusa, all of them have semi-active suspension implemented in them. They have electronic dampers. Now Endurance, which manufactures shock absorbers and dampers, they have started manufacturing electronically adjustable dampers in their manufacturing plant in Pune. Then we have tire pressure monitoring system. Now this is a simple example for just monitoring a tire pressures, the air pressure of each and every tire. And they have pressure sensors. These are the pressure sensors which are mounted in the wheel cap. So not the wheel cap, the valve, the wheel valve, the pressure valve from which we fill the air or remove the air of any wheel. So these sort of sensors are mounted on those valves, and they sense the data and they wirelessly transmit it to the inside unit, which is mounted which is mounted in the dashboard, or if you're using a separate system on your vehicle, as these TPMS systems are easily available online. You can purchase them online and you can implement in your current vehicles, current motorcycles or car, and you can have this system on your vehicle. Now the advanced feature of tire pressure monitoring system is auto deflating and auto inflating tires. This technology was firstly used by our defense vehicles, in our defense vehicles of DRDO. So our army vehicles, like the bigger trucks, there are actually trucks with 6x6 and 12x12 powering vehicles in our army. I had the opportunity to visit it twice. It is like the EME center of our army vehicle is located in Vadodara, in my city. So during my bachelor's, I had the opportunity to visit it and get the chance of checking out the 12x12 vehicles and 8x8 vehicles. There are 8 wheels on that truck, and all 8 wheels are being powered by V12 diesel engines. Then there are 12 wheels on a vehicle, and all 12 wheels are being powered by V12 diesel engines. So on such trucks, they need to have auto inflation and auto deflation of tire pressure. So what it does, they have, even if that was a safety feature for those trucks, but in our vehicles, in our SUVs, high-end SUVs, let's say Jeep Grand Cherokee, those kind of vehicles, we use it in desert and on road too. So in off-roading condition, we need to have low tire pressure so that the contact surface area is increased, while on the road surface, we want to have the optimum tire pressure so that the contact surface is optimally desired for what the fuel efficiency is required from the vehicle. So to do in those systems, there is a proper air compressor already fitted with the vehicle, inside the vehicle, which controls the pressure of each and every tire. And if the tire needs to be deflated, it releases the pressure in the atmosphere, and so that the tire gets deflated. But if the tire needs to be inflated, it actually compresses the outside air and pumps back the air inside the wheels to keep the pressure optimum. Now, a safety feature in this one is that if any tire gets punctured, so it starts losing the pressure. So TPMS system, in this system, will sense that pressure being lost from that particular wheel. So the air compressor will start acting, and it will keep on filling the air and keep the tire pressure maintained at one particular pressure. And even if the air gets leaking out of the tire, the air compressor will keep it maintained at that particular pressure. In that way, the advance of TPMS keeps the vehicle to move till the next fuel station where you can fix the puncture. This was the reason why defense vehicles had this system implemented in them earlier, and the vehicles which I'm talking about were used in Kargil war and such previous in the era of 90s. Those vehicles have been discontinued now, and those were from they used the technology of Russia and Czechoslovakia. I'm sorry, I pronounced the country's name wrongly. But moving ahead, now we have the autopilot, which was famously introduced by Tesla. Now, here the concept of AI and ML comes into existence, the auto intelligence and machine learning. So yesterday we learned about various sensors which can be used for which are various sensors like camera and wave propagation sensors and lidar and radar. So these sensors help into detecting objects like cars or pedestrians or street signs and the traffic lights. So the camera, the microcontroller is being like, as I said yesterday, the microcontroller which are being used in our electronic systems are nothing but a brain, just like us human beings. Even when we were when the newborn babies don't understand what kind of language to speak, what kind of how to recognize any object, but with time it learns. You see the term key, like pay attention to these terms. With time it learns. It needs to be, we even if we are teaching our kid to learn alphabets, we keep on showing A for apple, so it understands the apple looks like this, with which is red in color and has a small branch on top of it. That's how kids learn. So similarly we need to teach microcontrollers to detect the objects. So we need to teach the microcontroller that this is a car, this is a truck, this is a bigger truck. So there are features we need to showcase the microcontroller over and over again, so that it learns that certain features like headlight and small height, the height of that object is less, it has particular color, it has four wheels, that is a car. And if the height is more, it looks bulky, it is the dimension of that particular object is more, but it still has four wheels. But because of bigger dimension, we have taught our microcontroller to be to recognize it as a truck. So that's why it recognizes it as a truck. And in similar fashion, it recognizes cats, dogs, other animals, pedestrians, other human beings. It also detects face and the road signs. And based on this data, the camera sends the data to the microcontroller. The microcontroller actually recognizes it as road signs or pedestrian, and based on that it controls the wheels, the vehicle speed, applies the brake, changes the lane, and similarly it actually lets the driver to uh, give up his control on the vehicle and allow the electronics to take to drive the vehicle. The issue with in current generation autopilot is not like, there are still issues with Tesla's autopilot. If you follow Electro Boom channel on YouTube, then he performed a simple experiment with his Tesla, and he turned on like he was on a private road which had a wall at the end of it, and he drove his vehicle and turn on the autopilot and and he was checking out if Tesla will apply brake or not. And in that particular experiment, Tesla failed to brake, but the YouTuber being sitting inside the car, he was aware about it and he controlled the vehicle by himself. And that was an example that autopilot cannot be reliable at this moment, at this stage, in this generation. So the actual autonomous vehicles which are being developed by Apple and Google, which are used uh, in their campus itself, they have better sensors and heavier microcontrollers which have been tested rigorously in such a harsh condition. They have been tested that they have been certified to be reliable in a particular campus, but they cannot drive those autonomous vehicles on our general roads. So in autonomous vehicles, there are gigabytes and no, not just gigabytes. There are terabytes and petabytes of data being transferred in a minute. So to store that data or to read that much amount of data, like 1 TB, we are just talking, not just talking 1 TB of data. We are talking hundreds and thousands of TBs and hundreds of thousands of petabytes, which are 1,000 terabytes makes 1 petabyte. So that much amount of data is being transmitted over a minute or two, and to gather that much data and to process that much data, we need to have high end microcontrollers. So in those kind of scenarios, we don't use CPUs, we use GPUs. So Nvidia and AMD Radeons are the high performing graphic cards which we are using in our computers, but those particular GPUs are used for processing and managing these level of high terabytes and petabytes of data. And BMW and Mercedes have tried and tested their autonomous vehicles. They were showcased in Frankfurt Auto Show in New York. But the issue, like while showcasing those features of autonomous vehicle, they only like they were only tested in one particular road circuit. They didn't allow the passengers to take it out on other roads. So we will get there. Autonomous vehicle is the near future of our automobiles, and it will take time for our Indians to pursue it, because our traffic conditions are way too difficult for even the microcontroller to understand what kind of lane changing it will be needed in future, because we know how our traffic works, right? So, but yeah, autonomous vehicles are going to come in near future. Now, here comes some final, what we call this, final advancements in our technology. Now, throttle by wire. Now, from here, I'm going to take X by wire technology. X is the variable, and by wire technology. So yesterday, I might have shown this particular image in the first or the second most slide. So, how X by wire is nothing but taking the conventional mechanical system and converting into electronically operated system. So that is X by wire. So there are X can be a variable over here, which means this can be throttle by wire or ride by wire. We have brakes by wire. We have steering by wire. We have a new patent by Volvo with steering by wire, which I am coming ahead. So throttle by wire is nothing but there is a positioning sensor with the connected with the throttle pedal, which senses the position of throttle, which is nothing but a potentiometer, which we saw yesterday. So that potentiometer data is being transmitted to the ECU or ECM, electronic control unit, and based on that data, the potentiometer data, it controls the servo motor, which is controlling the opening and closing of the throttle valve. And while controlling this throttle valve, there is another positioning sensor which senses the angle of throttle valve, and it sends the data back to the ECU for comparing. So this is a feedback loop. So in with this TPS sensor, the throttle position sensor, the ECU compares the data of actual throttle position and the input given, and based on the difference, it corrects the position of the throttle. And there is necessary this is a necessity to have a feedback loop in every system, so that if the output is not as desired as the input, it needs to be corrected. So for that correction, we need to have a feedback loop. Next we have is the brake by wire system. So our current brake system is hydraulically operated, but if we apply electronic into it, we which means we apply hydraulic actuators and electronic switches and microcontrollers with it, it becomes brake by wire. So the same hydraulic circuit, while being the hydraulic circuit, it can be operated electronically. So as I mentioned in previously today in ABS and EBD, how the ECU controls the valves, the wheel cylinder valves, to engage or disengage the brake, or to keep the brake pressure maintained on one particular wheel, or to release the pressure on one particular wheel. So in similar fashion, brake by wire also works. Now, brake by wire is not being implemented in the current road vehicles, but Audi has got like it has improved on its brake by wire, and it has used in it in the e-tron SUV, which is going to come in future. Next, we have the steering by wire. Now, steering by wire is nothing but a simple system of simple electronic system using potentiometer, ECU, and servo motor. So to replace the rack and pinion mechanism, or to replace the hydraulic actuators, the parts like there is a potentiometer provided inside the provided behind the steering wheel, which senses the angle of the steering wheel, and based on that data, the ECU will control the servo actuators. It can be hydraulic or it can be servo motors, any of those both. And based on that, it will control the steering of the front wheels. Now, to take this technology further ahead, last year Volvo patented like they filed a patent about shiftable steering wheel. So in this patent, like what they did with while having steering by wire, they made a rail which will be mounted behind the dashboard or below, which will separate the dashboard in two parts, and the steering wheel will be mounted on top of this rail. So, and this rail is conducting in nature. So, the wires will be conducted, like the sensors which are inside the wheel, they will send the data through this conducting rail. So, because of this metallic and conducting rail, the steering wheel can be shifted from left to right or right to left. So this is still under, like, this patent was just a conceptual patent. They haven't made an experimental model yet, but we can see Volvo doing this because Volvo is known for their technology and high robust technology and reliable technology. So there is a possibility that we might see shiftable steering wheel in Volvo. Now, because of this patent, it can be like, it makes the manufacturing of vehicle easy, because in US we see left-hand drive vehicle, while in our country, in India, in UK, in Japan, we have right-hand drive vehicles. So for making vehicles for for different countries, we need to, like, the arrangement for rack and pinion is different for both countries, for left-hand drive vehicles and for right-hand drive vehicles. But with this system, with this technology, the shiftable steering wheel technology, the manufacturing companies don't need to develop separate rack and pinion or separate electro-hydraulic actuators for separate vehicles. They can just produce one vehicle and they can export it wherever in the world it is required. And finally, we come to one last technology, which is VANET, which is nothing but vehicle ad hoc network. Ad hoc is a Latin word for impromptu. Impromptu is something which is done instantaneously. मतलब हम बोलते हैं ना कि लास्ट मोमेंट प्लान बन गया, that is an impromptu plan. So that impromptu, that word is known as ad hoc. So in VANET system, which is nothing but, up till now we were talking about in vehicle communication, now we are talking about vehicle to vehicle communication. So to transmit the data of one vehicle to another, so that for purpose of autopilot or autonomous vehicle, we need to have some sort of communication network and that is nothing but VANET, vehicle ad hoc network. This was like, VANET is an inspiration of MANET, MANET. So MANET is the communication protocol used for our mobile phones, mobile ad hoc network, that is MANET. And from the MANET system, VANET was inspired, and it takes the wireless transmission, the data transmission for communicating data of one vehicle to another. Why? We'll see ahead. I have a video to make you understand what V2V communication is, vehicle to vehicle communication. I'll just change my, okay. Why isn't this getting played? Yeah. I don't know if is the audio audible?
No, sir. Audio is not audible.
Okay.
Audio is not audible.
I don't think this video has any audio. So I will just narrate over this video. So what it does is, the data of, like, the wheels, vehicle speed, the direction it is traveling in, it is being gathered and transmitted to other vehicles which are in the same locality. Why this is done is so that it can be monitored. So let's say this was the correct example. So the bike which was coming on the same way, it transmitted the data in the to this car, and this car had the data, and as soon as the driver gave its input, the vehicle knew that there is a bike coming, and it's pulled up, it applied the brakes and stopped it. So in similar fashion, it can prevent many what we call collisions, and it will allow the car to take decisions on its own. When the autonomous vehicle will come in handy, or the autopilot is powerful enough, this V2V communication is necessary. So the data has been transmitted over various vehicles. It can be transmitted from motorcycles to bike to trucks, and based on that, the lane changing and auto brake assist can be controlled on the vehicle. So this was a simple video about explaining the V2V communication. So we also have vehicle to grid communication, in which the data of the vehicle is transmitted to the grid. Grid here is other traffic signals or the road congestions or maps navigation system over here. So in V2G or V2I communication, the vehicle gets the data from infrastructure and it also gives the data to the infrastructure.
Hello,
Yeah.
Purong. I think someone Abhijit Randirvir has some doubt. He is raising his hand.
Okay. Yeah. Please unmute your mic and please ask your query.
Abhijit, you can continue with your doubt. Abhijit, right now you are in mute condition. You can unmute. Abhijit, am I audible to you?
If your mic is not working, then you can type on chat message.
Yeah. So while Abhijit types his query, let's just continue with V2G or V2I communication. So I have another video for this. So let's check out this video so that it gets understandable for you guys. So in here, infrastructure is nothing but our traffic signals and the navigation system. So this is an animated video. So it is helping us to it somehow is communicating. It shows the infrastructure to communicate with vehicle. So here the traffic signal knows that that particular truck is coming at 35 kmph, and and there is no traffic on other roads, so it changes the signal to green and allows the truck to go. Similarly, the traffic was red, but as ambulance came and stopped at that red light, it sends that ambulance and allowed it to go, because ambulance is an emergency vehicle and it cannot be stopped on the vehicle. So in similar fashion, vehicle communicates with the infrastructure and back and forth, and such a way the infrastructure can change the traffic condition for the vehicles, and it can sense the vehicles any traffic congestions, and it can change the navigation for any vehicle so that the driver can make decisions and take a faster route to its desired destination. So these are the types of VANET architecture. One is the pure cellular network, where the vehicle only communicates with the infrastructure and infrastructure communicates with the vehicle. The vehicles do not communicate with each other. They communicate with each other via the infrastructure. This is the pure cellular type network. Then we have the pure ad hoc, where vehicles directly communicate with each other. So there is no infrastructure in this. The vehicles are transmitting data over each other, and just like the case of bus, each and every vehicle can sense the data of each and every vehicle. Then we have the hybrid network. In hybrid network, the vehicles communicate with the infrastructure as well as they communicate with the individual vehicles which are on the road or which are near them. And why do we need VANET? So that we need VANET because it will enhance the driving safety. Each and every vehicle will know the speed of other vehicles around it, and based on that, it will take the decision of applying brakes or changing the lane. And even if there is any traffic conditions like high traffic congestion on any road, the vehicle will notice it, and based on the data of maps, it will change the route and take the fastest route to the destination which has been fixed by the driver. And with VANET, will work hand in hand with autonomous vehicles, because they are moving objects. They are going to transmit data with each other, and with this transmission of data of each vehicles, the vehicles will keep track of each other, and based on that, they will take decisions of speed and braking conditions. And that's how the future of autonomous vehicle will be more safer. And this brings us to the end of the session. Now, has Abhijit typed his query?
No, not yet. I think by mistake he
Okay.
has raised the hand.
Okay. No worries. So, if you have queries, now this is the time you can ask. And if you don't have any queries, then to learn more about active suspension system or Volvo shiftable steering wheel, or any or such sort of electronic system which I have mentioned today, I have made videos in detail on which are being posted on my YouTube channel. Secondly, one of the technology which I didn't mention today was Mercedes's DAS system, the dual axis steering system. They haven't introduced dual axis steering in their road vehicles, but this was implemented in their 2020's Formula One car. And that particular steering system control the toe of the front wheels, the toe in and the toe out. They, by pulling the steering wheel inward and out, pushing it outwards, the toe angle of the front wheels was changed by the driver, which helped in procuring high traction while cornering and in the straight lines. And because of that, Mercedes got its drivers championship and constructors championship in the year 2020. So I have also made a video about that. If you want to check it out, it's on my YouTube channel. Uh, if you don't have any queries right now, but if any queries arise in future, then you can uh, ask me over my email ID or my LinkedIn.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Yeah.
And also, as we learn about the communication protocol,
I can
actually,
say.
Internet of Things plays a very important role in the communication protocol. That is vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to grid, and it is very deep and detailing that it will require a separate session on that. So, as permits the time, so we just include some part of that.
Sir, what happened? These all innovative part or more deep knowledge about electronic control over the electric vehicle, we are keeping in the last year, that is B. So this third year first sem and third year second sem, we are covering main construction of the electric vehicle, and later on in the next year when students are introduced into the last year, at that time we are introducing all this deep knowledge of electronic components. What is the thought process behind it? First of all, get the knowledge about basic building of electric vehicle, and later on how to make it more comfortable by the use of electronic equipments or sensors and etc. So that was the simple thinking. So I would like to take the guidance from the both respected speakers also, that whether this thinking is correct or not. Am I on the correct path?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are exactly correct. Because
Actually, yeah.
what we
Actually,
were
you
trying.
are on the right track, and
Yeah.
initially you are making awareness to the students that how the
Yes.
built up and how the technology of electric vehicle differs from the conventional vehicles,
Yes,
and
sir.
it will be beneficial if you implement this knowledge in their projects work, and small things can be have a great effects on the industries also.
Yes. One more thing. See, I would like to move or transfer the community from traditional vehicles to electric vehicles, because in future our coming generations should say that our previous generation has given a good things to us, not a petrol, diesel, and the byproducts and the very dirty atmosphere. But the previous generation has given some good atmosphere to us. So to have that, the main thing is to change the mindset of Indian people, that to move from the traditional vehicle to electric vehicle. But as a part of mechanical engineering, our main role is to develop the basic vehicle first, get its knowledge, and whatever the maintenance part regarding mechanical equipment, can we reduce it so that any common man who is mainly related to the maintenance, its cost, and etc. So he will first of all think, यार इसको तो कुछ भी maintenance नहीं होता, so चलो ये गाड़ी ले लेते हैं. So that kind of change we want. That's that was the main reason. So sorry for that.
Yeah,
I'm
actually,
taking
in initial condition, if you consider the TCS campus in Pune, so they had developed the campus in such a way that the employees can actually park their vehicles, and they had built up their parking area with the solar grid system. So whatever the energy stored, they can power up their vehicles, and simultaneously, as a eco-friendly point of view, they can charge their vehicles as well as they can have a good environmental contribution for our society. So in such a way that many of the IIT's campus are also setting their campuses with the parking slot, including the solar roof panels. so that the energy, solar energy can be stored into the grid and it can be charged to the students either as well as the staff members vehicles. And they have provided the for the large campus, they have provided the inbuilt shuttles which students have the built up, and they are actually useful for the parents as well as for the students, those who are different or those who are the elder citizens. So for that purpose also you can focus on that concept also.
Yes, yes, yes. One more thing I would like to add. Club Mahindra is one of such an institute who is having a very high level research but spread over the very wide area.
Yeah.
And in such a kind of premises or in such kind of campuses to move from one station to another with the heavy luggage. So that is also one of the striking point where we can generate the audience and we can sell the vehicle. Why I am taking this point right now? With the help of this point, I would like to tell to students also that in future, if you want to become the entrepreneur, so manufacturing of electric vehicle and selling it to some such a campuses and providing the maintenance service throughout the year, that will be one of the startup, that will be one of your source of income, or you can think in that way also. Once you get sufficient opening and atmosphere opportunity, then also you can do. So such kind of right now, Harshal sir said that there are so many colleges, so many institutes, even some hospitals or some other what I should say organizations are there who are widely spread. Their spread is of so much huge amount of acres are also there. So within that, if they want to travel, we can do such kind of electric vehicle usage. And the second point, what importantly he has pointed out, that park the vehicle in such an area that after parking, automatically it start to charge, and after charging you can use it. So parking, that time also gets saved, and we can use the vehicle for the running also. That is very good point here.
Also, there is a huge market and business if you concentrate on retrofitment of the vehicles. So the whatever conventional gasoline vehicles are developed or they are existed, so you can make into the hybrid or a fully electric conversion. So you can find many of the videos on YouTube also. So many of the people, they are getting the kit ready with the battery pack, controllers, and charging system and all. So on your own also you can think about that, and the retrofitment is will be the fabulous business in future.
Yes, 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 definitely, sir, definitely.
Now, with this, I would like to suggest the students to make mini projects or take up small assignments by themselves and create some electronic system for as a project, as a teaching experience. So you can use, or you can use, yeah, you can always use Tinkercad to just develop a small system with potentiometer, Arduino, and this servo motor, which actually depicts the steering system of a vehicle. Then you can once that simulation is being conducted, you can purchase the hardwares and connect the hardware in same manner and uh, install the same code on that particular Arduino and perform and make the steering mechanism of any vehicle, so that it will make a steering by wire system. This will be a steering by wire mechanism. Similarly, you can make a project about detecting the wheel speed and just printing the wheel speed on a screen, and do certain projects so which will help you to learn about electronics. And to take this into advanced fashion or intermediate level, you can implement CAN bus protocol over it. You can transmit the data of potentiometer, like gather the data of potentiometer on one Arduino, then convert it into CAN frame, and then transmit it over the CAN bus, and let the other microcontroller or other Arduino to read that CAN data, and based on that CAN data, let it control the servo motor. This was my project during my postgraduate diploma. So you can do certain projects, you can implement CAN bus protocol, you can, with the same fashion, you can learn about CAN bus protocol. There are also microcontrollers which you can connect with your current vehicles, and you have the IDs, your CAN frame IDs for the messages of our vehicles. Then you can hack into our cars and you can gather the data of throttle pedal or brake pedal or steering, and get that data on your laptop screen too. This is possible in today's day. I haven't tried it because I'm still looking for those CAN IDs for the messages which are running inside the CAN bus in our vehicle. But this is possible, and that microcontroller is available on Amazon for around 500 or 600 rupees. So you can try this out.
Sir, initially I will suggest that when you are looking for the setup of the lab, so as the battery plays a very important role in the vehicles, almost any kind of electric vehicle you design, the battery is necessary, right? So in that 50% cost is if you purchase the battery, it goes for the battery pack. So you develop the lab in such a way that there should be a battery pack tester, there should be a battery pack packaging instruments like battery pack welding machines and output cell monitoring, cell balancing tester machines are required, so that in future, right, you can develop the vehicles right from bicycles, mopeds, and even for three-wheelers and four-wheelers also. So accordingly, you can just purchase the cells from the market, and from that, with the help of calculation, which I explained in the earlier battery management system. So with the help of that, you can customize the battery pack and you can implement as per the motor capacity, and you can make the good output from that.
Also, to add up to this, your developing our lab, I would like to say in our college, like it was after I left my college, the Parul University, they had this lab for hybrid electric vehicles, and they had ordered a test rig. Just like I think you guys might have a test rig for your petrol engine and diesel engine for heat balance sheet and MOS test. So in similar fashion, there is a small rig for a small test rig for hybrid electric vehicle, which showcases how the power can be like how it can be powered by electric motor or by petrol engine, and in hybrid mode where both electric and petrol both will be powered. It is a small rig. It is not as big as the it doesn't contain a engine. It has two separate motors, one depicting the petrol engine, other depicting the electric engine. If you want, then I can give you the number or the contact details of my faculty who is looking into the subject of hybrid electric vehicles in Parul University. So he can help you with such test rig as well.
Definitely, sir. That will be very helpful. Truly speaking, what we are looking for lab development for such a thing that from the next semester onwards, we can directly start to fabricate it. So, in that regard, what we should have, because if I just look to the Sanjivani College, M. Baha, E. Baha Construction, and their workshop, then we are having the tools, but most of the activities we are doing outsourcing, and I would like to do it in source. For that, obviously, there is a formality to go with the management and to purchase it. But I would like to know very important things so that in very recent future I can purchase it. And one more thing is that in that regard, I have taken one step. We are in a demand of pipe bending machine to construct the chassis. So can I go for that?
Yes,
Why
yes,
I'm
of
asking?
course.
Why I'm asking this question? Because before few days, Harshal sir has put a very good flyer about the retrofitting. But if I go for the retrofitting, I think it doesn't need the pipe bending machine and etc. So such kind of things we can optimize. So in that regard, I would like to have your guidance that in recent future, what is first expectations, or this is a very minimum requirement to start to develop the lab. So that guidance are there.
So, firstly, you would need one of the this particular spot welding machine which are used for which are used to spot weld battery cells with each other, making battery packs,
Okay.
and those are pretty expensive, to be honest. But if you want to develop like the retrofitting department in your college, then this is one necessary machine, and
Okay.
it pays itself back. That machine is it is expensive, but with time pays back the money.
Okay.
It is an investment. Secondly, a pipe bending machine is a requirement. It will be good for the future of your Baha team, and
Okay.
also if you are planning to participate in Supra, FE cycle, or go kart competition, then it is going to be really helpful for
Okay.
for the students themselves.
Harshal
And
sir,
coming to the job point of view, I think in industry, what is the requirement? You have to focus that, because if you manage to train the engineers right from this early stage, then there will be a huge outcome and there will be a good placements cell in EV departments. So the battery pack designing, battery pack development, then battery management system, that CAN protocol, cloud engineers, embedded system engineers for EV vehicles, IoT platform workers, and powertrains for EV vehicles, motor control sites. So these are the groomingly most extensively used R&D department branches, and they are looking for the extensive expert engineers in this field.
okay. Uh, Thank you, sir. One thing to Purvang sir, right now you have pointed a very good test trick in the Parul University, that is for hybrid vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Sir, can we have such kind of test trick for only electric vehicle? Means
Yeah.
I will I will
I
mount the battery,
Yeah.
and how much charging it will take, after how much speed it will get discharged, at what time I should again start the joining, because I should not completely drain the battery.
Yeah, I guess
Such kind of thing.
I guess the company that manufactured that hybrid electric vehicle test rig, they also manufacture such other test rig for electric vehicles and for battery testing.
Okay,
So I don't remember the name of the company, but it is located in Bangalore,
okay,
and they also provide customized test rig for colleges.
okay.
So
So now in this regard, I'm hardly request to you, please provide such a context to me so that I can start the communication through your respected channel. Then we can approach to that Bangalore company, and we can either purchase a ready-made, or either go for the customized.
sure. I will share you the for contact details of the faculty who is looking after the subject of hybrid electric vehicles in Parul University.
Okay,
So from him you can get the details for the manufacturing company who provides such test rigs.
okay, no problem, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Also, we can build up the moped vehicles initially for demonstration purpose, which can run on petrol as well as on electricity. So that kit is available right self. One of my friends sells it in Mumbai. So they are successfully implemented on all kind of moped vehicles. So initially, in campus we can have the testing on that, and we can use that to run the vehicles as well as for the student testing purpose.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for guidance, because I'm in a continuous motion of developing the lab for not only for the electric vehicle design BTech honors course, but for the coming teams of Sanjeevani College also, to provide such an infrastructure to them that they will be very comfortable to develop the innovative ideas and bring a very new features into the electric vehicles. That is the aim right now. So in that regard, you have given. But sir, one more request, that I will continue such kind of discussions with you. Whenever stuck up somewhere or I have doubts, I will ask a number of questions to you. So sorry
Yeah,
for.
definitely. Yeah, no
That's not
problem.
an
Yeah.
issue, sir. You can. It is our duty to answer your queries.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Now coming towards the student point of view, if you find any kind of a difficulty within these two sessions,
Yeah.
then please ask your doubts to Purvang sir.
Now I request our students, if you have any doubt right now, you can ask. And I hope you are writing all the points. If you don't have any problem, then we will, with the kind permission of respected speakers, Harshal sir and Purvang sir, we can stop the today's session. Anybody having a doubt? Shrikant, Shubham?
No, sir.
Okay. ठीक है. So with the kind permission of Purvang sir and Harshal sir, at this moment I stop the session. But one more thing, tomorrow's session will be of 3 hours, so it will start at 10 a.m. And if any change is there, then I will convey the same message to all the students. Okay.
Actually, sir, it will start at 9 a.m. and
Okay.
will
No
continue
problem.
till 12 o'clock.
Okay, no problem, sir. We will start at a 9 a.m. and we will continue up to 12. No problem.
Yeah, it will be purely on motor part.
Yes.
So
Yeah, there is a one unit based on motors only. So that complete unit will be taken care by tomorrow sessions. Okay, so I thanks to respected Purvang sir and Harshal sir for delivering the session, and I am so thankful to all the students for joining the session. Thank you. With
okay,
the
sir. Thank you,
conclusion,
sir. Yeah.
Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
for
Maybe
giving us.
Yeah.
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 Thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity to spread our knowledge with the students of Sanjeevani College of Engineering.
Basically, we are getting delighted to have such kind of discussion because very latest technology and very deep knowledge, very rarely we come across it. So you are giving that knowledge, and so we are basically thankful to you.
You're welcome, sir. I will keep creating such. I will be sharing this such knowledge through my videos as well.
Okay.
So there is like I'm still I'm there are ways that you can still be connected with me.
Yes, 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 definitely, sir.
So this channel is always open.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sir. And also maybe in next week I can come to that route. So
Okay.
I can visit within. I will inform you one day before.
Okay, okay.
So we can meet in next week also.
Okay, okay. No, no problem. So it will be very good opportunity for us to meet you.
And yeah, nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, okay.
Have a great day.
Have a good day. Same to you.